Hi, and welcome to the show. My name is Venugopal, and this is episode 129 of My First Job. Today, we have two interesting young people who are off to a career in education. Uh, they run a company which is looking at gamifying education, and we'll understand what that means. Sidhaanth has been a TEDx speaker. He's won over 150 prizes in debating. But how does that ultimately tie into education is something that we'll discover today. Smarabh has tried his hand with stand-up comedy. He's looked at various other options before coming into seeing how they can help young people out today. And what I find inspiring about this is the fact that they're not waiting for adults to tell them how to do things. They're sort of figuring things out on their own. And with a smaller gap between the younger people and them, which they can relate to younger people a lot better. They're not waiting for the curriculum to come in and then make changes. So let's bring each of them into the conversation and figure out how they're going to take it from here. Welcome to the show, Sidhaanth.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay. And welcome to the show, Smarabh.
Hi, very happy to be here.
Great. Okay. So, Siddhant, what were the other options that you considered? When there's always this phase when parents look at, what are you going to do next? So, I start this normally because that's the question that most people want to know. Did you have to struggle with what you wanted to do next? And all of us did. So, what was your struggle?
Right. That's a great context setting question, right? So I think in someday around third year is when you start thinking about placements and what you're supposed to do for a job and how your life is going to pan out from there onwards. And I think management consulting was something that I was flirting with as an idea because I knew a cousin of mine who was doing that, and I knew some of my friends who were doing that. And it sounded exciting because you get to travel, you get to like consult with different types of industries, different types of companies, and it was a high paying job. And so that was something I was thinking about. But again, no, none of those individuals would be coming to my college to get placed or place me. So I had to apply to them separately. At the same time, the word startup was arriving in the Indian ecosystem. And so I had these two ideas there, and I did definitely realize that engineering wasn't for me, or a core engineering job, because even though I was doing well in college, I was definitely not being trained to be an actual engineer. And so I think somewhere around third year, I took the leap of faith to prove to my parents within 1 year that once I graduate, I can do this, because they obviously needed that assurance of it. And
Yes.
so one of the smart moves I made was jumping in 1 year before I graduated itself, so that there was some proof of concept to my parents that this is not going to be an absolute disaster. And I think it
Okay.
went well, because by the time I was graduating, I was already in my
Good
company.
idea. Okay. Great. So, Smarabh, what is your story?
Uh, I think, yeah, a lot of similarities to Siddhant's as well. But yeah, I mean, well, I'd like to say I studied at such and such college, but to be honest, studying wasn't a big part of college. Uh, Going to class itself was quite a rare occasion because Uh, I mean, of course, see, I went to college to study BCom, and the only reason I went was because my parents said, you need at least a minimum qualificational degree in
Graduate.
such and such. Yeah, I always wanted to get into theater and cinema, story writing, and those kind of things. And luckily for me, also while I was in college itself, there was another startup that was beginning in Chennai, which was doing a lot of theater and all this Kriya Shakti. And in college itself, I started working with them, and I was getting opportunities to work as an RJ, to work as presenter for events and things like that. So for me, also, I think in college itself, I had moved out of what I was technically studying to be into what I wanted to be and things that I
Wanted to
wanted to
really
do.
do.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah, it was good.
That's all. Okay. Great. So let's say move next into fine. You decided, like you said, Siddhant, about how you're going to convince your parents that you do that. But convincing your parents is the first hurdle. When you go out there into the market where you're talking to educators and all of whom have a very fixed idea of how they want to train people. How did you go to parents first? Did you go to schools first? Did you go to children first? What was
Right.
the route?
The route was definitely trying all of it and seeing which works. So we started off with going to schools, and one of the challenges was, as a 21-year-old, when you go and talk to a 50-year-old principal, for them to take you a little seriously takes a while. But thankfully, there was a track record that I had of achieving things or doing things out of the ordinary, and what we were pitching as our core competence, which was public speaking, debate, MUNing. Those are things that we already had some experience in. So at least that was something that they bought into. But it was still definitely a challenge to be taken seriously. But on the other end, the advantage was they were also like, oh, who are these young kids? Let me just have a conversation with them, because they don't very often meet kids who are right out of college trying to do something in education, especially. With respect to parents, it was a lot easier. In fact, parents started reaching out to us because I think they realized that, hey, these kids seem like they're doing something really interesting. I would like my kids to do something like this maybe when they're older. And so I think there was a pull from the parents, but we had to push the schools a little bit and convince them that this was something of actual value.
Okay. Smarabh, how did you guys come together? What is the point at which
Oh,
you met?
I think. I mean, of course, I think in school itself we were competing at culturals and things like that. My first memory of meeting Siddhant is probably the culturals at Shishya, maybe 10th or 11th standard, I guess. My memory, I don't, somewhere around there. But from school, I mean, we've known we each exist, and then through college, I think our mutual friends gangs just merged together, and both of us were working on similar lines in at the time. Of course, Siddhant had already started his own company, Warhorse, at the time, and they were into education, and we were into education on a different side of things. In the sense, we were doing theater in schools, and professionally certifying people with theater, recognizable
Right,
certifications and things like that.
right.
But yeah, I guess we started through in college. We started meeting quite often, and slowly, I think we both realized that we're actually quite good together. And it did take some time, but I do believe that there's a right time that comes for certain things, and when it finally did come through, I think we chose the right path, and we're doing the right thing, working together, trying to build something together.
Wonderful. Because this is really the point at which you try and figure out how you work together. There are so many things that have to fall into place. But tell me this: how did you, since you had not worked previously with a company, or there are things like the daily chores, which is, how do you send out proposals? How do you fix the prices? How do you negotiate costs?
Yeah.
Even before I'm not even coming to that stage because I know that we'll talk about that eventually. But a lot of people have stars in their eyes and then think that, oh, systems can just happen. They don't happen. Raising a bill, following up on payments. Those are the things that, you know, the de-glamorized aspect of startups that people really don't think about. So you might have a great objective, but actually getting things off the ground. So in your case, how did you fix systems, or did you go chaotic for the first few months and then finally decided that, hey, we need to put something together?
Yeah, that's a very insightful question in terms of what it looks like to start up. Yeah, it was definitely chaos in the beginning. And I think there was some things that were good about the chaos, the lack of structure, the lack of predefined rules, like what a job is supposed to look like. We got to sort of play around with those ideas and these concepts that actually exist, right? But they're sort of predefined in a corporate setting, but we had the opportunity to see, okay, what do we want to do? What's our work life like? What do we want our work day to look like? But in terms of processes, yeah, for sure, we had a struggle. We had to understand the word processes. We needed to understand what these words mean, even starting up in terms of, like you said, the accounting, the making sure the bills are in order, making sure you're invoicing people. I would say it is figuring it out on the go. Like, I think the analogy they use with startups is you're driving the plane and trying to fix it at the same time, which is quite chaotic, but it's also exciting in that way. And I'd say that over the period of time, as you iterate, you get processes better, because as things break, you realize, okay, I need to make sure that this is fixed. But I think the big difference, if anybody is listening as a young person, to take away is that the refractory period between breaking and fixing or iterating next needs to be as short as possible. Like, so we're absolutely sure that things are going to go wrong, but in our head is like, as soon as they go wrong, we need to fix them as quickly as possible, and then see what else we could fix and what else we could make better. Because I think that's the big difference. Because even at a CEO of a company that's a Fortune 500 or an established organization, you're going to have challenges. You're going to have things that are going to come up that weren't expected, and you need to be agile enough to be able to sort of pivot or figure out what the answer is. And definitely for our generation, the internet is a godsend. Thank God for the YouTube babas who are online, who can help you and guide you through these processes.
Okay. So, Smarabh, what was your impression of the chaos? Because you worked in a company previously, and you were
Yeah.
doing a set of things which was more into dramatics, which is the art side of things. So
Yeah.
there's always a thing in a school where the important stuff is supposed to be what your competitive exams and all of those things. And these are okay to have, but not necessarily sports and arts and everything else. It's only off late that people are realizing that no, this builds something else. It builds a different perspective altogether. So, what
Yeah.
has been your experience?
Uh, so I've had this um, I don't know what to call it exactly, but this unique opportunity to be able to work only with startups. So I work only with startups from the beginning. So I mean, I may not have been actually even at the startups that I was working with, I was there from the beginning, or of the startup itself. So I but the headache of making the process wasn't really on me. It was more testing the process was on me. So someone would set the system, and I just keep and I go into the real world and test it, and then we go back with feedback and we keep changing it, which is how I guess any systems are formed, generally
Right.
speaking. So my experience with that, and the good thing was that because I worked with startups from the beginning, like even when I came back in and I came back to Sidhaanth with Ashwa and everything, it's a very seamless fit because I know what the processes generally happen with a startup. I know how it works. I know that you need patience with some things and you need to take time with some things, but eventually we are in control of what our goals are and how to get there. So I think that's been something that I realized that with a little bit of agency, all of us can do. It's just about keeping your eye on the ball and just constantly testing, constantly giving feedback, and seeing what works and what doesn't, and being willing to adapt according to that. So
Okay.
I think that's been a
Right.
good learning for me. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, in terms of uh, your first programs that you conducted for, let's say, kids, what was the first thing that you landed? And tell me what happened. Because, there's a point at which rubber meets the road. You met a principal, met some people, and they say, okay, we'll give you a shot. Go ahead and, you know, do a training session. So, what was that first training session like? And what did you do to prepare? And what did you do to start things off?
I vividly remember my first training session. Actually, it was awesome. I think one of the big differences was the kids experiencing a trainer who was not very far away from their age, and I think that was a game changer for them. That was one of our big advantages, in fact, because we could relate to the kids who were in the classroom. We were like not more than 5 to 7 years older to most of the kids in that classroom, on some degree, maybe 10 at max. And so that was definitely something that really worked in our favor. Just the relatability and the fact that we could use the same references. We understood what memes were. We were able to communicate with them in the language that they understand. The second big thing was the actual fact that, okay, what were we actually trying to get them to learn? We were trying to empower them with the ideas of being able to speak and the ideas of being able to think. And we used MUN, debate, and public speaking as the fulcrum to these skills. And when we did that, what I remember is after my first sessions with the kids, and we were using speaking as a first module, public speaking, it was tremendous to see kids who never thought they would be able to,
No,
kids
that's
who
okay.
never
Yeah.
thought they'd be able to actually speak in front of an audience or speak in fact, were able to do that and learn how to use their body language, and you could see their own self-image changing. You could see suddenly confidence that is imbued in their personality. And I feel like that was eye-opening for me, because even though the hypothesis and the premise was, oh, this is what's going to happen, when you actually make it happen and you see the difference in a child from somebody who's not able to communicate as a social animal to being somebody who can now talk and communicate and get people to listen to them, it creates a sense of self-confidence that very many skills can't provide, because we are social
Right.
animals. And so when people start listening to what you have to say, and you have the ability to command a room or ability to hold a room's attention, in that sense, you can see that suddenly they start realizing, wait, if I could do this and people are giving me attention, I could maybe do other things. And I think that was the most exciting trigger for us. And that initial feedback, or the initial experience of this clearly working with kids, and our hypothesis of, hey, if you get the child to start speaking early, their confidence and their life trajectory starts changing, that hypothesis was sort of proved, and we were super excited about that.
Okay. Uh, Smarabh, I'll ask you a slightly different question, which is that the value of face-to-face conversation is not something that kids today seem to take to very easily. They prefer a message, they prefer conversation which is not face-to-face. Am I imagining things, or do you believe that this generation is a little less comfortable with striking up new relationships or looking forward to them?
I think that's a really well thought question, and so at least from what I understand, see, even when we were kids, right? I say it like I'm some really old man, but when we were kids,
I'm the old man in the
uh,
room, right?
yeah. So no, but even when we were kids, right? Like we used to spend most of our time staying away from home, or at least that was the case for me and most of my friends. Like the home existed to go eat food, sleep, and because we were forced to do homework and study and whatnot. But other than that, like our life was built on connections with our friends outside. Like we'd spend time on the ground. Like I lived on the ground through school. Like anybody comes to the ground, whatever you're willing to play, we'll play. So then there's somehow or the other you have to develop the communication skills, because you'll meet different people. You'll have to communicate different ways. We used to play team sports. So there a lot of opportunities for different types of communication presented themselves because of the way of life that was happening at the time. Right today, this is just an observation. Right today, I went back to the colony that I grew up in. Yesterday to meet my mother who was in town, and it was 5 o'clock in the evening, and there were no kids outside at all. Like the ground was empty. There's not a ball at the ground. There's nobody there. So I can't presume to know exactly what the kids were doing at home, but clearly it's either that they've got their priorities set so well that they come back from school and they're just going straight into study, and they're getting better at something that they want to be better at. But it also seems to show that the communication level has just shifted to a digital format. It's either something like this on a video call, or over a phone or a text message, something like that. And maybe that is the way of how maybe they've just simplified communication, or they've let it come to a certain level where this much is enough, and maybe they're happy with it. But again, really speaking, when you actually go and meet people, when you actually see them, and they see you, literally it creates a bond that builds a little more trust. So especially if you're trying to build a career, you're trying to build a company, you need to go and meet people face to face, at least, so that you can build that bond and a little bit of that trust factor. At least for me, and I know even for Sidhaanth, that's probably how a lot of relationships and things like that were built, right? So uh, I can't say for sure that all kids only prefer communicating through a message or digitally or something, but it's really important to develop the skill of communicating in person, of expressing the right way, of using the right kind of body language so your tone and everything is conveyed, because that's exactly what is being lost if you're taking digital or message communication or something that's preferred for you over a face to face or in person meeting. So and today, considering AI can do all this for you, in sense, like it can handle your messages, it can send a reply, it can answer a call for you, you can set an automated message. Like, this is a skill that AI cannot replace. So this is why at Ashwa, it's a very, very important thing for us to help people. I'm not even say, we're not even saying even for teaching or this thing. For me personally, I feel like that's too heavy a word. I would say we're creating environments where youngsters can come and instinctively learn how to be the best versions of themselves. So I think it's a really important skill to have, a very, very important skill to have. And if that's not the priority for youngsters who are trying to be entrepreneurs, trying to grow in their careers and things like that, it's something that they should really look into. Because if you just look into what AI can do for you today, you will know how many skills can be replaced. So you better start working on the ones that can't be. Is
Great.
is what I would have to say on this topic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll just do a midway kind of summation, which is what I. So I'm speaking to Sidhaanth and Smarabh. This is the youth panel that we do once a month. And today we're talking of gamifying education. And so far, both Siddhant and Smarabh have told me about how they decided to set this up in the first place, what were the things that they went through, what were the reactions from the family, how hard was it to break through into the structure of education where this is not seen as one of the necessities, even though it is. They also spoke about what their first impressions of doing the training was and how it impacts children, because it really makes a difference for them to be able to express themselves. We'd led into the question as to why is it that conversations, in-person conversations, are so rare or difficult, and why are young people afraid or reluctant to be awkward? Because that's a real big part of what their social circuit is going to be over the next few years, and it's a skill that they really need to develop. So if you like what you're seeing, please subscribe, share, and let your friends know, because the idea is to spread the message and to ensure that more people get to understand what the show does, which is to tell you what are the possibilities in a career. You don't have to decide. You first have to evaluate what the various options are. So the next phase, I'm going to be talking to them about what does gamifying learning mean? I mean, it's one thing to say that you're taking a game and then using principles, but when you actually put it into practice, what does it mean? So we'll take it from there. Okay. Now, yeah, Siddhant, so let me ask you, how did this whole thing of gamifying education come into your mind?
So like Smarabh was mentioning, I think we early on realized that these skills that we were talking about, which is communication, critical thinking, emotional intelligence, leadership, these were skills that were necessary for the real world, but schools weren't teaching them, or weren't teaching them in a way that you actually learn them. They were sort of like expected to be learned through life just on your own. And that's why they were called soft skills. We're rebranding that as super skills nowadays, because like Smarabh mentioned, AI is going to come and replace most of the core skills that we talk about, and the super skills are going to be the human skills. So the
Yeah.
what was sort of very clear to us. But then when we started working in schools and with students, especially the age that you were talking about, who are digital native, right? Who are used to an iPad or used to a screen early on, and they're used to this high dopaminergic like circuitry that this world that we live in. And so for them, we realized that, okay, things need to be more engaging. Like you, and also the way learning works is learning requires you to be a little more alert than usual, right? You can't be bored or you can't be relaxed. You need to be a little alert. You need to have a little adrenaline, little cortisol, little norepinephrine. And so this is the acetylcholine a little bit. So you need to have your brain like wiring or buzzing at a certain degree for you to start really absorbing and learning. And what we realized was the way, what I noticed was, and from my personal experience, was what really got me involved in something was playing games. Whether it was at a party with my friends or whether it was at school or wherever it was, or whether it was even computer games, the idea was whenever I played a game, I was absorbed into it because there was always something happening. I was getting feedback, I was getting rewards, I was either competing. And so that level of alertness or arousal, as we would say in a psychological perspective, was provided by games. And so when the reason we looked at gamification as an answer to the engagement problem, to the problem of students wanting to learn, we thought gamification solves that. And we looked at gamification in two ways, right? We looked at it as one way is the mechanics of the game, which are how is the game played, what are the points that you get, what are the powers you could use, what's the way you play the game that makes the game interesting. And the second part of it was the story aspect of it. And so as human beings, we are narrative based creatures. Like we tell ourselves stories, and our lives are in fact the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves, or the story that somebody else told us about ourselves. And so as narrative creatures, we realize that when you provide a story to an individual and provide context to what you're learning through the story, I think that makes a huge difference in terms of buy-in and in terms of like the why of your learning, and why is it that you're learning this particular idea or not this particular idea. So stories have really been a central theme to human beings. If you look at the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, the Homer, the Iliad, they're all about stories and lessons being taught through stories. So when we brought those two ideas together of story and story-driven learning and gamified learning, we made it story-driven gamified learning. And that's the reason we sort of conceptualized the idea of the future of learning being play, being the idea of, okay, on some level, I'm here because I'm highly engaged by this game. And the last thing I would say about this is, as human beings, we learn the best when we're at play. That's what children are meant to do, in fact. They're supposed to be playing. You know, on the playground or somewhere or the other, you should be playing, because play provides this really interesting space of unstructured but structured learning. That means there is a degree in which you can bend the rules and you can play around with the rules and you can have conflict, and there's a bit of friction between human beings. And so you have to conflict resolve, you have to collaborate, and you have to like make sure you are achieving the goal, which is what human beings do collectively as a species. And play provides that unique space where there is structure. It's not chaos, but it is a little chaotic, but there is some level of rules. So it's like this beautiful blend of controlled chaos that leads to like an engaged mind, engaged brain, and therefore learning a lot better.
Great. Okay, so let me take this into the play without learning as an indicator of character. I think all of us have seen this, that in a normal social environment, you can kind of hide your traits. But in a game, that ability, because it's in the moment, you give away far more of who you are as opposed to what people are in a classroom. They can be restrained. But if a person is losing, you can make out whether he or she can take it or they can't. You can see if they resort to cheating because they need to win. And you see how deep that is. What have you observed, Smarabh? Because you're seeing some of these sessions. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I think, okay, so I think you hit the nail on the head with some of the points that you were making yourself. So yes, definitely. I think games open up a sort of avenue for people to see themselves as they are. and not only see themselves as they are. See, the thing is, you are who you are when nobody is watching you. Okay, that's something that my mom used to say that just sticks with me, because that's very, very true, right? And but the thing is, when nobody is watching you, accountability and responsibility are at a very low level, where, because so that means you're not paying attention to your actions. You're not being aware of you're not being self-aware. You're not observing yourself and accepting, or understanding what it is you're doing and why it is you're doing it, right? But again, the same thing when you play a game, you're in the public eye. So if we're playing a game with a lot of people in a room, yeah, it really does bring out parts of you that you probably did not pay attention to. And suddenly it's really important to be conscious of this, because there are people watching you, and that matters so much more to someone. Because, like even Sidhaanth was saying earlier, we're social animals. So the relationship we have with society, with people and our community is really important to us. So when we're playing a game, we not only see see what's happening in the game and learn from it and grow. We also see ourselves, because it's in the eye of, oh, so many people are here. So there will be thresholds that you will break, and it's important to have those experiences in life as at a younger age, because the earlier you see your patterns, you see how you behave in different situations, in pressure, in victory, in whatever, on all the situations that a game can provide. The more you understand how to regulate yourself, or how to steady yourself or move in a certain direction, and you understand that, okay, these are things that are within me. I have to accept this, and I have to find a way to be better. I have to find a way to try and do well, to try and contribute more. And I think that's a very important process. And at a young age, it's great that it can happen. And from what I've seen in classes, I see kids are really enjoying it, and I see they come back and they say, sometimes even in a group, they're afraid to say it because other people will be listening to their feedback. But then when the class is over, they'll run up to you on the side and be like, "Sir, that thing you said last week, I thought about it, and this is really important." So it's clearly something that they can even take home and think about. It's not something that's just happens, and they're just like, "Oh, it happened, and now I can just ignore it in my mind." So it I've really seen that this process helps them. That this process allows them to be better, to understand who they are, and try and be the best version of themselves in all these different environments.
Great. Okay. So, Siddharth, let me take this in a different direction, which is every game requires a structure, in the sense that ultimately there's a point at which you play the game, but it is supposed to lead to something. How did you go about fixing that?
That's an interesting question. I would say, as an educator, we had to obviously look at outcomes as our final boss battle for our own individual class, right? It's the idea of, okay, what happens once these kids go through this experience? What are we looking for them to evolve into? And so the overall structure is always placed in a way that you are having repeated experiences that are challenging you just a little more than your regular threshold, that pushes you a little further into towards developing yourself. And so you do that progressively over the year, and you finally end up with an individual who has broken their own shackles of what they assumed they could do. And whether that skill is about thinking or speaking or debating or writing, it doesn't matter. That's the progression you take. And so that's the overall structure we place, which is like, okay, if the end outcome is for them to be able to speak well, and the first level of speaking well is to tell a good story, here's the first structure for our program, which is the outcome is them being a storyteller. And this is the progression that they go through. The second, let's say we take the speaker journey, is once you become a storyteller, you want to become an orator. That means you want to be able to speak in front of an audience. You want to be able to play with words, like draft a speech that's compelling, use persuasive language. And so that becomes the next checkpoint. And so because we were thinking about like a game, and I played enough games, it's always like, okay, what's checkpoint 1, what's checkpoint 2, what's checkpoint 3, and how do I keep reinforcing what I did in checkpoint 1 while I'm playing towards checkpoint 2? And that's actually how learning works. And so games actually lend a really beautiful like platform and landscape to learning. And so that's the overall structure we always placed. And for the kids, if I was sitting from the child's perspective, our goal is always like, okay, what is the conflict or the narrative influence that we can place here that's going to keep them hooked onto waiting for what happens next? Like, why are they playing the game? Yeah, of course, they're like unwittingly getting better at speaking because of going through this experience that we have curated for them. But for them, when we structure it, it's the question we keep asking ourselves is this interesting? Is this story working? Is this going to make them jump in their seat or get shocked by it or be interested in what we have to say? Because regardless of what the lesson or the skill we're trying to teach, the way we keep them hooked is the narrative that we build through the class. So I would say that's the way we imagine classroom building in Ashwa.
Okay. Smarabh, I'll ask you a slightly different question, which is what Sidhaanth just explained, which is how you use narratives and how you use the story format in order to improve oratory skills. What happens with written skills? Because that is not as public. But I think it's a very important part of thinking. Because when you write, you have to think. You can't just put down words and let's say that when you first try, it's all gibberish to begin with. But there is this easy option called ChatGPT, which I'll put in a phrase or whatever, and it seems to sort of give you an overall thing. My point has always been that ChatGPT gives you a pattern of what that answer should be, which fits. So like the LCM, the least common multiplier, it works at that level. But the really great writers are the ones who manage to put a spin, manage to have a turn of phrase, manage to bring about something. How do you try and build the importance of writing into storytelling?
Right. Okay. I think that's also a very important question and thought to address. Firstly, let me break all the illusions of whether ChatGPT is helping people write. ChatGPT can do just about anything for you in terms of writing. So as long as you can tell it what you want, it will give you exactly what you need, and it works. So that is definitely something that AI today is very, very capable of doing and doing really well. And like we had a discussion earlier about experience, depending on how much experience the user of that has, like he will get the exact results that he or she whatever they want, right? As far as our learning environments are concerned, right? When we say we're playing this game to help them develop their skills for just communication, at the base level itself, it does include writing and thinking skills, because again, we split the classroom into teams. So there are it's a system of, let's say, four houses, right? And they compete with each other over different games, and they go through a board which has different points and all that, and they compete with each other over different games at different levels. So let's say, for example, the competition at a certain point in the game is that it's going to be a debate, right? So the structure is such that Sidhaanth has already curated lessons for them to understand how debate works, where you have to start from, how to build your case, how to think of your thinking process itself, how to think, how to build your case, and then how to present it. So how to present it, or how to communicate it, or speak it is the last part of this process, right? So, and when they work as a team, right, and like you said, it's very important for people to have the writing skills. And it's also possible that someone who's a great writer may not be a great orator, right? So, which is why when they're working as a team, they always have that opportunity where, like, hey, these are the points we need to discuss. Hey, this is how we need to do it. Hey, hey, check this out. I've written this. You can have a read. But I think, Ramesh is very good at presenting. So Ramesh should present it. But Suresh is a great writer. So Suresh will write it. And we will discuss all our points. So it makes them think in terms of, okay, so this is what we need when we're presenting a case. This is how we need to build that case. And it's not just debate, it's for storytelling also. Even for storytelling, we give them a premise, they get time to sit, think, and then come back to it. So it's not a case of, there are games where, like extempore, where you have to just go on and start talking. which is completely a test of your oratory and communication and confidence and all that. But where it comes down to the writing skills and the thinking skills, we do give a lot of importance to that, because that's exactly what we're trying to build. Because if they're not able to build the critical thinking skills, the emotional thinking skills, understanding how their thoughts work and how to present them, we're just setting a structure for them. So, like Sidhaanth said, in play, because even though we set a structure, there are different ways that you can go about it within that structure. It actually gives you, I feel, more creativity when you have a sort of a limitation for how far you can move within something, right? So then you're pushed to try as many ways as possible to get the best result for yourself. And because it's competitive, they will push themselves to their limit, because for some reason humans, we have this thing where we're like, oh, whatever it is, I need to be better than someone else when it comes to a competition. Nobody should be able to tell me that I'm not good enough at this. So that it's a thing where they do bring out the best versions of themselves. They're on alert, and they're thinking, they're able to sit down, write, analyze, and then communicate. So I completely agree with you that the writing skills are very important, and they're really important in shaping how youngsters think. And it's important to learn it at a younger age, because only then it sort of embeds itself in your mind, and as you go along, you're only improving it and scaling it to be the best version that it can be. So we do give a lot of importance to that. And yes, like you said, chat gpt is very capable of doing half your work for you. So this is also a really important skill in the 21st century, and it's something that people should be working on if that's not the case already.
Okay. So just to sum up what we've been discussing in the last 20 minutes, I think I threw curveballs at both Siddhant and Smarabh, because I was asking them about how they arrived at gamifying, what do they mean by gamifying, and then I think they answered those questions with a great deal of depth, because it's something that they face on a regular basis. It's not as if you can get away with surface level questions because you're trying to teach. It's a very different aspect when you're trying to learn, and it's a completely different perspective when you're trying to teach. And very often, that is the point at which you have to try and figure out what exactly a term means, a concept means, and even what it means to people. And what I'm really heartened by is the fact that they're not trying to tackle the syllabus. That is very far. I think that's a wonderful term to say, not soft skills, but smart skills, because that's a way forward. And it's not as if they don't know what ChatGPT does and what it doesn't do, but they're also aware of its limitations beyond a certain point. Why the thinking faculty has to improve. In the final segment, what I'll be talking to both of them is about how do you prepare children for a future which is undergoing a great deal of change, and no one has answers. Let's not pretend that schools have answers or other people have answers. No one has the answers as of now, because we are living through a period of intense change. And there's a lovely TED talk by Livingston, Ken Livingston, which he said, how can you prepare children in the first standard for a future where 10 years from now, you don't even know what will exist? So I think there's this wonderful thing that they said about you can only improve your own soft skill, the structural skills that you have. And that is probably the best way forward. That is a question I'm going to ask Sidhaanth, which is, what do you tell young kids when they come and tell you, what should I do? What's my career supposed to be?
That's definitely a question I get. And I when I answer it, they get a little shocked, but then they also understand what I'm talking about. First, I tell them that I want you to remove the idea of career out of your head. Okay, career is a capitalistic, factory-driven, or maybe not even factory-driven, but it's definitely something that the Western world has placed upon the universe or the world that we live in. Because careers isn't what human beings are about. We are verbs. We do things. We don't do one thing, right? We do a lot of things. And so I would say remove the idea of a career in your head and start looking at yourself as an individual who can add value. And if you learn how to add value in whichever way possible, like the cycle of money will work in a way that you will make some money somewhere or the other. And if you can add more value or more, the quality of your value is even better, then you're going to make more money. Right? On some level, that part of the equation will solve itself if you, and on a very fundamental core level, realize that the market works on value creation. Right? If you can create value somehow within the market will reward you for it. So I want you to not think about careers at all and start thinking about how do I add value? Do I add value as a cinematographer, as an editor, as a storyteller, as a speaker, as a coder, as a software engineer, whatever it is, right? Value can be even as a teacher, a mother. I believe there's economic value to being a mother. It's just that we don't count it. Okay, so with the idea of a career outside, like remove that thought from your head and start viewing yourself as somebody who adds value. I would say what they need to do is build themselves. Okay, the idea of education, I like this quote, right? First of all, educate comes from the word educe, which means to bring out, not to put in, right? So the goal of you to get educated is for you to bring out what you already have within yourself, and your best version expresses itself, and the world will benefit from it, because that's how we are built. And the second idea is that the true mark of an educated human being is to get what they want, right? Which means that if you're somebody who is like hustling and like trying to get to the top and like make all this money, and then you think and you did all this education for it, but at the end of the day you realize you wanted none of this and this is not the life you want to live, I wouldn't call you an educated man, right? Or an educated human or an educated woman. I would say you have played the game a certain kind of way and won certain things, but you're definitely not along that direction. So if you ask yourself the question of, if I'm an educated human being, I need to get what I want, I would say first of ask yourself, what do you want? Like, what kind of life do you want to live? What kind of lifestyle do you want to have? That's one. Second is, I would say, build skills. Don't build knowledge and degrees, right? First of all, knowledge building itself is, there's a conversation there that I don't want to unpack, but think of yourself as a person who uses skills to manipulate the world. And so start working on skills, whether that skill is speaking, whether that skill is coding, whether that skill is drawing, whether that skill is storytelling. Figure out what are the skills that are relevant in the future and start building those skills. Now, obviously, there are certain skills that are clear-cut economic value skills, right? Like I was talking about, editing and software developing and so on and so forth. But then there's some foundational core human skills that you need just to live, right? You need to be able to actively listen, because at some point of time, a friend is going to talk to you and you need to be there for them. Your parents need to be heard. They need to be listened to. And hopefully you as a parent listen to your child, right? So there are certain skills that are necessary as a human being. Forget about the economic structure of the world and whether capitalism is going to crumble or not, or whatever is going to happen. At the end of the day, there are certain foundational things that you need to be able to speak and communicate yourself well. You need to be able to think your own actions through. Right? I'm saying critical thinking starts at, what am I doing with my own time and with my own life right now in the next 10 days? Am I wasting it away, or am I using it to some degree of compound interest that's going to make a difference in my life in the future? These are critical thinking skills. You don't need to start debating whether FDI should be added into countries or not. You should start with, what am I doing? And then I would say there's a skill of self-awareness and self-regulation also that schools never taught us, that I think is going to become paramount in the age of AI. Because if AI takes over a lot of the jobs, you're going to start feeling a lot more nervous. You're going to start feeling a lot more dysregulated. We already live in this opulent, abundant, like crazy world where it's so overstimulating that you might be finding yourself burnt out at 20. And I'm sure kids watching this right now will be like, dude, I'm just 20 and I can't even imagine a career. I can't even get through my semester, right? It's because you're overwhelmed by the world that has been created, and you were not, as a biological being of 2000 years or 200 or millions of years of evolution, you were not designed for this world. And so some of the skills that you need are emotional regulation. So whether it's meditation or breathwork as a skill that leads to emotional regulation, these are things that you need to start developing. Because I would say at the end of the day, it's the human being you become, the skills that you have as a human being that are going to matter in life Whether it comes to your relationships, whether you're spousal or friends or family or parental, that's what's going to matter. And how you communicate with your colleagues also is going to matter. I love this phrase, this idea, right? It's something that I picked up early on in my entrepreneurial journey, which is the idea of, it's not what you get at the end of the journey, it's who you become, right? That's the goal. Like, that's what the Ashwa journey for me also is about. It's about me becoming the person who can do this, or who is making the difference in the world. And it's not what I get from it. And so if you start framing yourself as who you become in the process, then you start realizing, okay, it's where I spend my time, where I spend my energy, and where I spend my attention. Look at these three core aspects and then try to work them around the foundational human skills and try to figure out what's going to happen. Because like you said very rightly, sir, nobody has a clue of what's going to happen in the future. And if you don't know what's going to happen in the future, the only thing that you can bank on is yourself and your ability to be able to manage yourself and express yourself and communicate yourself and think through your own actions and thoughts. And so I think that's the core of the future. Forget about what's going to happen. Start thinking about, who am I? What am I doing? How can I be better? How can I build these skills as a human being? Because in an uncertain world, your ability to pivot, adapt, and learn is super critical, and your ability to communicate, think, and just be a human being is going to be that second big part of it. And if you get that one part sorted, then as the evolution happens of the world and whatever is happening around you, you can plug and play, you can figure it out, you can pivot, you can realize what to do, because you have to play it by the ear. But you need, and to take that turn of, or that phrase, right, to play it by the ear, that means you need to know how to play first. Right? You need to know how to play these skills, how to play the being that you are. And once you know how to play that being, you'll play it by the ear. Because like a jazz musician, it will be instantaneous, it'll be spontaneous, it'll be immersive, but it'll definitely be brand new also. But you know how to do it.
Wonderful, Sidhaanth. I think you've very articulately put it all together, and I hope young people who are listening will go over that several times, because it's important to pick up the nuances. At the end of a class in marketing, I asked some people as to what kind of jobs they'd be looking for. And I asked them, what do you do? So some of them said, I'm really good at binge watching. I said, yeah, unfortunately, there is no economic benefit from binge watching. Nobody pays you money to binge watch. You know, it's a consumption. And I have this little formula which says we are balancing between creation and consumption. So if your consumption is at 20% and your creation is at 80%, you're fine. Because that's where you spend your time and money. I mean, your effort. Whereas if the thing is flipped, that is, you're spending 80% of your time consuming and 20% creating, there's a serious problem. And I think that's the problem that we are wrestling with today, because every single one of those distractions is hard to surmount. So, Smarabh, let me come to you on what is it that you see and what have you sort of worked out after working with students so far?
Okay, so I think again this is also something really important that young people should be thinking about and should be addressing on a large scale. Yeah, definitely. You know, a lot of these things, ever since social media has blown up and the access to content has become a lot easier. Like in just the last, let's say, 10 years, right? When probably 2015 was when I finished college. So that means, and even then, like the theater was the place to go and watch a movie. Like you had to put in an effort. You had to get out of your house. You had to book a ticket. You had to be there on time. You had to buy whatever. You have your whole process. You get your popcorn, whatever. And it's a planned event. It's something that you have to plan for. You have to call your friends together, or you go alone, whatever. Right? But it's something that you have to plan, and there is so many other things that you have to get done to be able to go and do this. Right? Today, your food is delivered to your house. You can sit in your chair. You just have to turn on your television. You have access to, so many apps and OTTs and whatnot. And content is overflowing. You can choose whatever excites the mind, and basically consumption has become a lot easier than creation, because it's just the easier option to the mind, because you're just, oh, should i should I make a video. Let's say you're a social media creator or something like that, and if the constant question in your head, the constant conflict in your head is, should I sit and make reels, should I sit and make some content, or should I sit and consume content? If this conflict itself exists in your mind at a constant level, there is a problem. Like, because if you're prioritizing your comfort over what you could be doing and what you could be achieving, what you could be learning through that process, then yes, there is a little bit of a problem, and it's something that you need to address immediately. But it is, I also agree that it is very, very convenient for you to slip into a consumption mode of things, because today so easily everything is available to you. So if really you want to switch out of that, then you need to find solutions. To give you an actual example, like I used to live on Swiggy. I used to just order food all the time,
I'm
right?
glad you're
But then
admitting it, because there are a lot of
yeah,
people who wouldn't admit that, even if they are.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I mean, it was because when Swiggy came out, right, I'm talking about 5 years ago. When it came out, it was such a revelation. I was like, wait, I can just sit at home and I can sit in front of my computer, and just food will be delivered to my house.
Delivered.
And it was just a wow. Okay, this is great. I don't have to go anywhere. I can live in my cocoon. Whatever has to happen will happen here. And see, when you want to make the change, then you're like, okay, you know what, I'm going to delete this app. It's not going to be on my phone. I'm going to hire somebody who will cook for me. Because I mean, if you're living alone, if you live with family and all those sort of things, then maybe even that is already sorted for you. But yeah, if you're living alone or something, you need to make a decision and be like, you know what, I will invest this much money in something, so that I ensure that this does not continue to happen and continue to ruin things for me on different levels, right? So it's a conscious decision. First of all, you need to be aware of the fact that this is happening, and then you need to understand that this is not the best direction that we should be going in, and then you have to have the strength to execute it and say, okay, stop, this is not how it should be going forward. And whether it's consumption versus creation, or getting attention versus paying attention, like there's the way social media and the way we consume content and the way technology has evolved has made it very easy for us to just sit in one place and you know and consume. Like the ecosystem has created the perfect environment for you to be the best binge watcher in the world. Like that should be something that everybody can do. It's not a skill that one person has. It's a skill that anybody can have, because it's something
Yeah.
that's just shoved down your throat. Hey, I can binge watch. That's something that everybody can do. Okay, but and real freedom, I think, is having the capability to say no and choosing your the thing that's going to be difficult but will pay off in the long run, right? So it's about making the right and difficult decisions at the right time, or at least you have multiple learnings. Maybe you fail a couple of times, but at some point you put a stop and say, okay, enough. Let's try and change this. Let's try and be better. Let's try and do better. And that actually gives you scope to be the best version of yourself. Because today apps are trying. If you're getting something for free on an app, okay, it means that you are the product. That means your attention is being sold to so many people and companies that you are not even aware of that. So if you're what you're doing by sitting and consuming is you are making other people money instead of making
Yeah.
yourself money. So if you can just look at it from that perspective, at least financially, and say, my God, if I just make something, someone else will watch this and I will make the money. And if some small things, some small realizations that could change how you behave. If these are things that you can observe and be aware and be conscious and be present in the moments and be aware of where they slip, and so that you can catch them, that that would be a good and important skill to have. And like Sidhaanth was saying, those are the skills that we need to build. We need to be able to regulate our emotions, understand what they are, understand how we're consuming things, to what we're paying attention, whether to what sort of things we are saying we want to get attention. Like all
Yeah.
this requires a certain level
Smarabh,
of
I get
presence.
that. Unfortunately, I have to end it there because I
Yeah.
think I didn't realize that this was just, we would never have a problem meeting. The problem seems to be now that how do we stop this? Okay. So thanks, guys, for coming on the show. It's been great fun. And we'll just end this